The stench of synthetic alcohol and sweat permeated the air of Helios Outpost's most notorious establishment. The Stellar Drift Bar was a haven for those seeking to disappear smugglers' exiles and those running from pasts too painful to acknowledge. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the worn metal tables, obscuring the faces of patrons who preferred anonymity. Anders Cade sat alone in the corner booth, his back to the wall, and eyes constantly scanning the room. Years in exile had taught him caution. His calloused fingers wrapped around a glass of amber liquid that promised oblivion, but delivered only a temporary numbness. The former military pilot's weathered face revealed little emotion, but his eyes, sharp and alert, despite the alcohol, betrayed a man who had seen too much. "Commander Cade," a voice cut through the ambient noise of the bar. Anders didn't flinch, though his pulse quickened. Few people knew his former rank, and fewer still would dare to use it. "You're mistaken," he replied coolly, not bothering to look up. "No commander here." A figure draped in the formal attire of the Ethetheran Empire slid into the seat opposite him. The meticulous cut of the uniform, adorned with insignia of the highest diplomatic ranks, stood in stark contrast to the shabby surroundings. High Counselor Thalen Anders recognized him immediately, though they had never met. The Empire's reach was impressive, even in this forsaken corner of the galaxy. Former Commander Anders Cade, Thalen, corrected himself, his voice lowered. "Discharged from the Interstellar Defense Force after the Proxima incident. Top of your class at the Academy. Best neural interface pilot the fleet has ever seen." He placed a small, hollow projector on the table. "And precisely the man I need." Anders took another swig of his drink. "The Empire made it clear they had no use for pilots who disobey orders." "Times change," Thalen replied smoothly. "Circumstances demand flexibility." "Not interested." Anders moved to stand. Thalen's next words froze him mid-motion. "The royal vessel Astral Dawn is trapped in the Vortex Nebula, with the twin princesses aboard. Every elite pilot has refused the mission. They say it's suicide." Anders slowly settled back into his seat, his interest reluctantly piqued. The Vortex Nebula was notorious, a swirling maelstrom of radiation, gravitational anomalies, and unpredictable energy currents that had claimed countless ships. No navigational computer could plot a safe course through its chaos. "Why would royal princesses be anywhere near that death trap?" Anders asked. "Scientific expedition gone wrong," Thalen explained tersely. "Princess Elixa is leading research on energy patterns within the nebula. Her sister, Princess Cell, insisted on accompanying her. Their ship suffered critical system failures and drifted deeper than intended." Anders laughed bitterly. "And now, you want me to fly in and save them, the Empire's precious heirs? I want the best pilot alive to attempt what others claim is impossible," Thalen countered. His finger activated the hollow projector, filling the space between them with a swirling three-dimensional map of the nebula. Streams of data scrolled alongside the image: radiation levels, gravitational readings, energy fluctuations. "We've tried sending in automated rescue vessels. None returned. Remote piloting fails the moment they enter the outer boundary." Anders found himself studying the hologram despite his reservations. The chaotic energy patterns of the nebula seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm that felt almost familiar. His fingers unconsciously traced patterns in the air, following invisible currents. Thalen watched him closely. "You see it, don't you? The flow. That's why I'm here. Your unique neural interface abilities. You don't just pilot ships, you feel them." Anders withdrew his hand as if burned. The Proxima incident had revealed his unusual sensitivity to energy patterns when connected through a neural interface, an ability the military had exploited until his refusal to follow an order had cost lives. His discharge had been swift and merciless. "Why would I help the Empire that destroyed my career and left me to rot in this backwater station?" Anders demanded. Thalen's expression remained impassive. "Because you're still a pilot at heart. Because this is the challenge you've been waiting for." He paused, meaningfully. And because the Empire is prepared to restore your rank and record if you succeed. Anders stared at the hologram, watching the swirling energy patterns. Something in the chaos called to him, like a puzzle, asking to be solved. The alcohol in his system couldn't dull the surge of adrenaline at the thought of attempting what others deemed impossible. "I'll need my ship," he said finally. "The Nomad. Not some Imperial vessel with protocols that will get me killed." "Already arranged," Thalon replied, revealing he had anticipated Anders' cooperation. "The Nomad has been refitted with enhanced sensors and radiation shielding. I work alone." Anders continued setting conditions. No Imperial oversight, no mission parameters except getting those princesses out alive. "Agreed," Thalon said too quickly for Anders' comfort. "You have between 36 and 72 hours before the radiation damages become irreversible for human physiology." Anders stood, decision made. "I need complete technical specifications of the Astral Dawn current coordinates and all sensor data you've collected from the Nebula's edge." "You'll have everything within the hour," Thalon promised, rising to his feet. As Anders moved to leave, Thalon added, "The Empire remembers both its heroes and its disappointments, Commander. This mission determines which category permanently claims you." Anders didn't reply. He had stopped caring about the Empire's opinion long ago, or so he told himself. But as he walked through the crowded bar toward the docking bay, where his ship waited, he couldn't deny the quickening of his pulse. The impossible Nebula. A royal rescue. Complete autonomy. For the first time in years, he felt alive again. The Nomad was barely recognizable when Anders arrived at Docking Bay 17. Imperial technicians swarmed around his modified light cruiser, installing new equipment and reinforcing the hull with radiation-resistant plating. Anders approached slowly, torn between appreciation for the upgrades and irritation at strangers touching his ship. A technician in chief engineer coveralls approached him, datapad in hand. "Commander Cade, we've implemented the modifications requested by High Counselor Thalon," she said efficiently. "Enhanced sensor array, reinforced hull plating, and upgraded life support systems." Anders nodded, inspecting the work with a critical eye. "The neural interface." "Completely overhauled," she confirmed. "Military-grade latest version. Far more sensitive than your previous setup." That explained Thalon's confidence in his ability to navigate the Nebula. The Empire was giving him every advantage technology could provide. Anders ran his hand along the Nomad's hull, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingertips. Despite the modifications, she was still his ship, the only home he'd known since his discharge. "She'll be ready to launch in 3 hours, the technician informed him. "Make it 2, Anders replied. Exactly 2 hours later, Anders sat in the pilot's chair of the Nomad, running through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. The ship hummed around him, systems coming online one by one. He felt the familiar anticipation building within him, the moment before flight when possibilities seemed endless. The neural interface awaited him, sleek and intimidating. Anders hesitated before connecting it to the base of his skull, remembering the last time he'd used such advanced technology. The Proxima incident had begun with a similar interface, ended with his disgrace, and haunted him ever since. "Helm control established," he muttered to himself as the connection formed. Instantly, his awareness expanded. The Nomad became an extension of his body engines, his legs, sensors, his eyes, hull, his skin. Data flowed directly into his consciousness, bypassing traditional displays. The sensation was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Nomad requesting departure clearance. He transmitted to Helios Control. "Clearance granted, Commander," came the immediate response. "Priority vector established. Good hunting." The docking clamps released with a resounding clank that Anders felt through the ship's structure. With the gentlest of mental commands, he guided the Nomad away from the station, accelerating smoothly into open space. The stars stretched and blurred as he pushed the engines to full power setting course for the edge of the Vortex Nebula. As the Nomad approached the nebula's periphery 6 hours later, Anders slowed to sublight speed. The swirling mass of gas dust and energy loomed before him, a kaleidoscope of blues, purples, and reds that belied its deadly nature. Standard sensors began flickering, struggling to maintain coherent readings amidst the interference. Anders closed his eyes, relying instead on the neural interface to process the information. Through it, he could sense the energy patterns more intuitively, currents, eddies, and flows that standard instruments failed to detect. The chaos held patterns like a turbulent river, with channels running through the rapids. He guided the nomad closer, feeling his way forward cautiously. Each slight adjustment of the ship's trajectory was based on instinct more than calculation. The outer boundary of the nebula approached the point where remote piloting systems had failed and automated ships had gone dark. Anders took a deep breath and pushed forward. The moment the nomad crossed the threshold, alarms blared throughout the ship. Radiation levels spiked, gravitational sensors went haywire, and navigation systems failed completely. Through the neural interface, Anders felt the ship straining against forces that threatened to tear it apart. Yet, beneath the chaos, he sensed what he had glimpsed in Thalon's hologram, currents of energy flowing through the nebula, like hidden pathways. He surrendered to instinct, letting his enhanced perception guide the ship through the narrowest of safe passages. The nomad shuddered and groaned as Anders pushed it through a particularly dense energy wave. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the mental strain of maintaining control. Each course correction required split-second timing and perfect execution. One mistake would mean joining the wreckage of previous rescue attempts. After 3 grueling hours of navigation, the sensors detected a faint transponder signal, the astral dawn. Anders adjusted course, following the signal deeper into the nebula. The royal vessel's emergency beacon grew stronger as he approached until finally, the ship itself came into view through the swirling gases. The astral dawn was an impressive sight even in its damaged state. Nearly 3 times the size of the Nomad, its sleek lines and elegant design marked it as a vessel of royal significance. But multiple hull breaches and darkened sections testified to the Nebula's assault on its systems. Anders maneuvered the Nomad alongside, initiating docking procedures with the larger vessel. Astral Dawn, this is Commander Anders Cade aboard the Nomad, responding to your distress signal. Static crackled over the communication system before a strained voice replied, Commander Cade, this is Captain Vidian of the Royal Guard. Your arrival is unexpected. Suspicion colored the captain's tone. Identify your authorization code. Anders transmitted the codes Thalon had provided, then added, I've been sent by High Counselor Thalon to extract the princesses. Your ship is not salvageable in its current condition. After a tense pause, Captain Vidian responded, Docking approved. Bay 3 is operational. The Nomad slid into the designated docking bay coupling mechanisms, engaging with a solid thunk. Anders disconnected from the neural interface, gasping as his awareness contracted back to normal parameters. His head pounded and muscles ached from the hours of intense concentration. He moved quickly to the airlock, checking his sidearm before cycling the door. The air that greeted him from the astral dawn carried the tang of electrical fires and emergency systems. A small delegation awaited him, 4 royal guards in formal but battle-worn uniforms, led by a stern-faced officer who could only be Captain Vidian. Commander Cade, Vidian acknowledged stiffly. The princesses are in the secure chamber. Before you meet them, I must verify your extraction plan. Anders matched the captain's direct approach. We have a narrow window. The Nomad can navigate the energy patterns, but we need to move quickly. The princesses and essential personnel only. Impossible, Vidian countered. We have 32 crew members. And the Nomad can safely transport 10 at most, Anders stated flatly. We'll need to make multiple trips. A new voice joined the conversation, clear, authoritative, and unmistakably royal. That won't be necessary, Captain. Anders turned to see 2 women approaching, flanked by additional guards. Though identical in height and facial structure, the twin princesses of the Ethetheran Empire could not have presented a more striking contrast. Princess Elixa moved with measured grace, her white gold hair pulled back severely royal attire, modified with practical additions that marked her as the scientist Thalen had described. Princess Cell, by contrast, wore her identical pale hair, loose around shoulders adorned with more traditional royal insignia, her movements fluid and expressive. Commander Cade, Princess Elixa addressed him directly. Your reputation precedes you, both the accomplishments and the irregularities. Anders bowed slightly imperial protocol, returning to him, despite the years away. Your Highnesses, we have limited time before the radiation affects critical systems. We understand the urgency, Princess Cell interjected, her voice warmer than her sister's. But we cannot abandon our crew. Anders met her gaze steadily. The Astral Dawn's life support systems. Operational for another 30 hours, Captain Vidian provided. But deteriorating. Then we have time for 2 extraction runs, Anders calculated quickly. The princesses and 5 others now. I return for the remaining crew after delivering them to safety. Princess Elixa studied him with analytical intensity. You believe you can navigate the nebula multiple times? I know I can, Anders replied with confidence he wasn't entirely sure he felt. But each passage increases the risk. We need to move now. The twins exchanged a glance that seemed to contain an entire conversation. Finally, Princess Elixa nodded. Captain Vidian and 4 guards will accompany us. Chief Engineer Lion will oversee the remaining crew until your return. A tall, angular man stepped forward from among the officers, Lion Anders presumed. Something in the engineer's demeanor triggered Anders's instincts. A tension in his stance, perhaps, or the carefully blank expression that revealed nothing. As you command, Your Highness, Lion said smoothly. I will prepare the crew for the second extraction. Gather only essential personal items, Anders instructed the princesses. We launch in 20 minutes. As the group dispersed to prepare, Anders caught Princess Cell studying him curiously. Something wrong, Your Highness, he asked. You're not what I expected, she replied candidly. High Counselor Thalen described you as our best hope, yet the Empire cast you aside. I find that contradiction interesting. Anders maintained a neutral expression. The Empire has its reasons. I have mine. Which are, she pressed. Getting you safely through the nebula, he deflected. The rest doesn't matter. Her lips curved slightly. Everything matters, Commander, especially the things people insist don't. Before he could respond, she turned away to follow her sister, leaving Anders with the distinct impression he'd just failed some test he hadn't known he was taking. Exactly 19 minutes later, Anders led the royal party aboard the Nomad. The ship's compact interior had never felt more cramped with the addition of 7 passengers. The twins settled into the observation seats behind the pilot's chair, while Captain Vidian and his guards took positions in the rear compartment. Secure for departure. Anders announced, reconnecting to the neural interface. The familiar expansion of consciousness washed over him as the ship's systems integrated with his mind. Through the interface, he sensed the princess's growing unease, elevated heart rates, quickened breathing. The neural interface allows you to feel the ship, Princess Elixa asked, scientific curiosity evident in her tone. And everything in it, Anders confirmed, initiating undocking procedures. Including passengers. Your anxiety won't help our situation. Fascinating, she murmured. A full sympathetic neural network with human integration. I've read theoretical papers but never observed it in practice. Anders didn't respond, focusing instead on guiding the Nomad away from the Astral Dawn. The moment they cleared the larger ship's protective field, the Nebula's forces assaulted them. The ship bucked like a living thing, energy waves battering its reinforced hull. Through the neural link, Anders sensed the princess's fear, spike though neither made a sound. He guided the Nomad into the currents he had navigated earlier, following the invisible pathways through the chaos. Remarkable, Princess Elixa observed after several minutes of watching him work. You're not using standard navigation protocols. You're feeling your way through. Standard protocols get you killed in here, Anders replied tersely, executing a sharp maneuver to avoid a sudden energy surge. The nebula doesn't follow rules. Yet you're finding patterns, she persisted. The currents have predictable behaviors if you observe them long enough. Anders spared her a glance. She was no longer watching him but studying the nebula itself, her eyes tracking energy flows, visible only through the ship's specialized sensors. Her scientific mind was cataloging, analyzing, understanding. The nebula research was your project, he realized aloud. Yes, she confirmed. The energy patterns here could revolutionize our understanding of interstellar physics. The Empire's power systems could be transformed. Worth risking royal lives, Anders challenged. Knowledge always carries risk, she responded calmly. A violent shudder ran through the ship as it crossed a particularly turbulent boundary. Anders felt the strain through the neural interface hull integrity holding, but systems stressed beyond recommended parameters. Princess Cell gasped behind him instinctively, grasping the edge of her seat. We're still on course, Anders assured them, making minute adjustments to compensate for the increasing gravitational distortions. Another hour to clear the outer boundary. That hour stretched into an eternity of constant vigilance and split-second decisions. Anders's consciousness merged ever deeper with the ship, until he could no longer tell where his body ended and the nomad began. Every energy fluctuation registered as tactile sensation across his skin. Every course correction flowed from instinct rather than calculation. When they finally broke free of the nebula's outer boundary, Anders released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Standard sensors stabilized, navigation systems came back online, and the constant pressure against the hull subsided. We've cleared the nebula, he announced, disengaging from the deepest level of the neural interface. The sudden return to normal awareness left him momentarily disoriented, his vision blurring. Commander! Princess Cell's concerned voice seemed to come from far away. Anders blinked, forcing his focus back to the present. I'm fine. Just the interface disconnect. Your neural activity must be extraordinary, Princess Alexa observed with clinical interest. The sympathetic resonance necessary to navigate those patterns would require unprecedented integration. It takes a toll, he admitted, setting course for Helios Outpost. But the Nomad handled it well. The ship did nothing, Princess Cell countered. You guided us through. Before Anders could respond, Captain Vidian emerged from the rear compartment. Your Highnesses, we've established communication with Helios Outpost. High Counselor Thalon awaits your arrival. Anders frowned. We're not staying at Helios. I need to refuel and return for the rest of your crew. The High Counselor insists the princesses be transferred to an Imperial vessel immediately, Vidian stated. Another rescue ship will retrieve the remaining crew. No other ship can navigate the nebula, Anders objected. That's why Thalon recruited me. Those are the orders, Commander, Vidian replied firmly. Anders turned to the princesses. Your crew will die waiting for a rescue that can't reach them. Princess Alixa's expression remained impassive, but Princess Cell leaned forward. Captain Vidian, prepare a message for High Counselor Thalon. Inform him that we will remain with Commander Cade until all our people are safely extracted. Your Highness, I must protest, Vidian began. Note our protest, Princess Alexa interrupted, supporting her sister with surprising unity. But transmit the message. Vidian straightened clearly, uncomfortable contradicting direct royal commands. As you wish, he relented, returning to the communication station. Thank you, Anders said quietly. Princess Cell regarded him thoughtfully. We don't abandon our people, Commander. A principle I believe you share despite what your record might suggest. The reference to his past did not escape Anders, but he chose not to pursue it. Instead, he focused on preparing the Nomad for docking at Helios Outpost, where they would refuel before attempting the return journey through the nebula. The docking procedure at Helios proceeded smoothly, Imperial credentials, ensuring priority clearance despite the station's typically bureaucratic protocols. As the airlock cycled open, Anders turned to the princesses. "Refueling and system checks will take approximately 3 hours," he informed them. "I recommend you rest while you can." "I prefer to observe the maintenance procedures," Princess Elixa stated. "The modifications to your ship merit study." "And I would welcome the opportunity to stretch my legs after confinement," Princess Cell added. "Perhaps you might show us this outpost, Commander." Anders hesitated, acutely aware of the social gulf between himself and the royal twins. "Helios isn't designed for royal visitors, Your Highness. It's a frontier station rough around the edges." "All the more interesting," Princess Cell insisted, her expression animated by genuine curiosity. Captain Vidian intervened before Anders could respond. "Absolutely not, Your Highness. Security protocols forbid unscheduled excursions, particularly in unsecured locations." "Captain," Princess Elixa spoke with quiet authority, "you will oversee the ship's preparations with Commander Cade. Princess Cell and I will remain in the secure diplomatic quarter of the station, with 2 guards." The compromise satisfied no one, but left little room for argument. Anders watched as the royal party departed for the station's modest diplomatic facilities. Princess Cell, casting a final curious glance over her shoulder, before disappearing through the docking terminal. 3 hours stretched to 4, as Helios's technicians struggled to replenish the specialized radiation shielding necessary for another journey through the nebula. Anders used the time to review the data collected during their passage, searching for patterns that might make the return journey safer. The energy flows had been chaotic, but not random. With each exposure, he understood the nebula's behavior more intuitively. Captain Vidian appeared at his side as he studied the sensor logs. "The princesses are returning now," he reported stiffly. "High Counselor Thalon has transmitted his disappointment with their decision to continue the rescue mission." "But he's not countermanding it?" Anders asked, surprised. "The royal twins wield considerable influence even over senior counselors," Vidian replied, "particularly in matters concerning their research projects." Anders nodded, turning his attention back to the preparations. "We're almost ready to depart." "Commander Vidian," said, his tone shifting slightly, "I feel I must acknowledge your skill in navigating the nebula. Few would have attempted it, fewer still succeeded." "Just doing the job I was recruited for," Anders replied, uncomfortable with praise from an Imperial officer. "I reviewed your service record," Vidian continued, ignoring Anders' attempt to deflect. "The Proxima incident. You disobeyed a direct order to fire on a civilian transport suspected of harboring insurgents." Anders tensed. "That transport was carrying refugees, not rebels. Intelligence was wrong." "And you were right," Vidian conceded, "though the Empire never acknowledged it publicly. 16 families survived because of your decision. And 12 soldiers died in the subsequent ambush because I didn't eliminate the supposed threat," Anders countered bitterly. "I know my own record, Captain." "Do you?" Vidian asked quietly. "The official record was sealed after your discharge. Few know the complete truth." Before Anders could demand clarification, the airlock cycled open, admitting the princesses and their guards. The conversation abruptly ended, leaving Anders with unanswered questions and a renewed sense of disquiet. "We're prepared to depart," he announced, pushing aside his confusion to focus on the mission at hand. Princess Elixa nodded, her expression revealing nothing of their time on the station. Princess Cell, however, seemed subtly changed, more alert eyes, darting between Anders and Captain Vidian, with newfound suspicion. "Is everything all right, Your Highness?" Anders asked as they boarded the Nomad. "Perfectly," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Shall we rescue the rest of our crew, Commander?" The return journey to the nebula passed in tense silence. Anders reconnected to the neural interface, his consciousness expanding once more to encompass the ship. Through it, he sensed the elevated stress levels of everyone aboard, particularly Princess Cell, whose calm exterior belied internal turmoil. As they approached the nebula's boundary, Anders spoke without turning. "Something happened at the station." Princess Cell started slightly. "What makes you say that?" "The interface," he explained. "I can sense changes in vital signs, stress patterns. You're concerned about something that wasn't bothering you before." She hesitated before responding. "On the station, I overheard a transmission intended for Chief Engineer Lyon. It was encoded but contained references to Corvallian diplomatic protocols." Anders frowned, maintaining focus on the approaching energy patterns. "Corvallians. They're trading partners with Athetherin, aren't they? And occasional rivals." Princess Elixa interjected, revealing she was listening closely. "Particularly regarding Nebula research. Their technology relies heavily on energy sources, similar to those I'm studying." The implications settled uneasily as Anders guided the Nomad into the nebula's outer boundary. The chaotic energy patterns enveloped them once more, but this time, Anders navigated with greater confidence, anticipating the flows and currents. "You believe Lyon is collaborating with Corvallian interests?" Captain Vidian asked, his professional demeanor giving way to concern. "I'm saying the coincidence is troubling," Princess Cell replied. "Our expedition experiences accidental system failures that strand us in a nebula of immense scientific value, and our chief engineer receives encoded Corvallian transmissions." Anders processed this new information while maneuvering through a particularly dense energy cluster. "Could explain why your ship's systems failed so comprehensively. Sabotage rather than nebula damage." "A serious accusation," Captain Vidian noted gravely. "One will investigate upon reuniting with the crew," Princess Elixa decided. "For now, our priority remains extraction." The Astral Dawn came into view. After nearly 2 hours of careful navigation, its emergency systems still functioning, but visibly deteriorated since their departure. Anders initiated docking procedures, establishing communication with the waiting crew. "Astral Dawn, this is Commander Cade returning for extraction. Prepare remaining personnel for immediate evacuation." Chief Engineer Lyon's voice responded, the transmission partially distorted by nebula interference. "Commander, we've been monitoring your approach. We are prepared for transfer." The docking completed with precision, and Anders disconnected from the deep neural link, maintaining only minimal ship awareness as he prepared to receive the remaining crew. Captain Vidian positioned his guards at strategic points throughout the Nomad, a precaution that now seemed warranted given Princess Cell's suspicions. The airlock cycled open to reveal Lyon, leading a group of 23 crew members, the remaining complement of the Astral Dawn. Anders noted immediately that they carried more equipment than he had authorized, including several sealed containers bearing scientific markings. Chief Engineer Princess Elixa addressed Lyon formally. "You were instructed to bring only essential personnel items." "Your research data, Your Highness," Lyon explained smoothly. "I presumed you would consider it essential." Anders studied the containers with growing suspicion. "Those will need to be secured in the cargo hold. The passenger compartment is already at capacity." "Of course," Commander Lyon agreed, signaling 2 crewmen to move the containers. "We are most grateful for your return." The evacuation proceeded efficiently, crew members filing aboard and finding positions in the already cramped quarters. Anders watched Lyon carefully, noting how the engineer's gaze frequently returned to the secured cargo. Something about the man's demeanor continued to trigger warning signals in Anders's mind. The 2 smooth responses, the calculated movements, the way he positioned himself between Princess Cell and the cargo hold. "We'll depart in 10 minutes, Anders announced, returning to the pilot's chair to prepare for the challenging exit from the nebula. The neural interface awaited him, promising the expanded awareness necessary to navigate safely with the additional passengers and cargo. As he reached for the connection, a soft voice interrupted him. "Commander, a moment, please." Princess Cell had approached without his noticing, her expression troubled. She leaned closer, speaking quietly enough that only he could hear. "Lyon insisted on personally retrieving items from my quarters. He spent nearly 20 minutes alone there before returning with a standard travel case." Anders considered this information instincts sharpening. "Your quarters contain something of value." "Nothing that would require 20 minutes to locate," she replied. "I'm convinced he used the opportunity to access my secure terminal." Anders nodded slightly, decision made. "Stay near your sister. I'll have the cargo inspected before we leave the nebula. The princess returned to her position as Anders connected to the neural interface. The Nomad systems integrated with his consciousness, but this time, he extended his awareness specifically toward the cargo hold. Through the ship's internal sensors, he detected unusual energy readings from one of Lion's containers, subtle but distinct from standard scientific equipment. Anders initiated the undocking sequence, guiding the Nomad away from the astral dawn with practiced precision. The nebula closed around them, immediately energy patterns more volatile than during their previous passages. With 23 additional passengers, the ship handled sluggishly, requiring greater concentration to maintain stability. Captain Vidian, Anders, called without turning from his controls. Would you check compartment 3? The environmental controls are showing irregular readings. The coded request was understood immediately. Vidian nodded to two of his guards who moved discreetly toward the cargo area. Anders monitored their progress through the ship's systems, simultaneously navigating through an increasingly turbulent section of the nebula. The confrontation, when it came, erupted with explosive suddenness. Alarms blared throughout the ship as Vidian's voice shouted over the communication system. Security breach, cargo hold. Through the neural interface, Anders sensed the discharge of energy weapons, the sudden movement of multiple bodies, and a spike in ship-wide adrenaline levels. He maintained course, unable to disengage from navigation without risking everyone aboard, but expanded his awareness to include the developing situation. Lion had anticipated the inspection. The moment Vidian's guards entered the cargo hold, the engineer had activated a concealed device, a Corvallian data siphon designed to extract information from the ship's systems. When confronted, two crew members revealed themselves as his accomplices, drawing hidden weapons. In the ensuing firefight contained within the cargo hold, but felt throughout the ship, one of Vidian's guards fell wounded. Princess Elixa moved to help her scientific training, including emergency medical protocols. Princess Cell, however, did something unexpected. She slipped away from her sister's side and moved purposefully toward the pilot's chamber, where Anders sat connected to the neural interface. "Commander," she said urgently, "Lion planted something on me. During the evacuation, he brushed against my shoulder. I felt something attached to my collar." Anders split his attention between navigation and the princess, guiding the ship through a violent energy wave, while assessing her through the interface. His enhanced perception detected it immediately. A small disc adhered to her formal attire, pulsing with subtle electronic signals. "Don't touch it," he warned. "It's a Corvallian tracker tag, probably linked to the data siphon." Princess Cell remained remarkably calm. "Can you remove it safely?" "Not while I'm navigating," Anders replied. "And not without knowing exactly what it's designed to do. Some are booby-trapped." The princess made a swift decision, removing her outer ceremonial coat with the attached device and securing it in an emergency containment field designed for hazardous materials. "Will that neutralize it?" "Temporarily," Anders confirmed, impressed by her quick thinking. "But we have bigger problems. The nebula's patterns are shifting. The path we took in is destabilizing." The ship shuddered violently, as if to emphasize his point systems, straining against forces that threatened to tear the Nomad apart. Through the neural interface, Anders sensed the new pattern, forming more chaotic, less predictable but still navigable, if he pushed his abilities to their limit. Princess Cell steadied herself against his chair as another shock wave hit. "What about Lion and his accomplices?" "Captain Vidian has them contained," Anders replied, his awareness encompassing every corner of the ship. "But the device they activated is interfering with our systems. We're losing sensor efficiency." Without hesitation, Princess Cell moved to the auxiliary control panel. "Tell me how to help." Anders would have refused under normal circumstances. Auxiliary controls were complex and required training. But as the nebula's fury increased around them, he recognized the necessity. Through the neural interface, he guided her hands across the panel, directing her to make adjustments that compensated for the failing sensors. "The patterns are changing faster than I can track them," he admitted, pushing his consciousness deeper into the ship's systems. I need to concentrate solely on navigation. Monitor the interference from the Corvalian device. If it spikes, alert me immediately. For the next 45 minutes, they worked in perfect synchronization, Anders navigating by instinct and enhanced perception. Princess Cell, managing the cascading system failures caused by the combination of Nebula interference and sabotage. Through it all, the ship continued its painstaking journey toward the boundary, carrying its royal passengers and treacherous stowaways through the maelstrom. When a particularly massive energy wave struck the port side, overwhelming the shields and buckling the hull plating, Princess Cell was thrown from her station. Anders sensed her fall through the interface, but couldn't divert his attention from the critical course corrections necessary to prevent complete disaster. Without warning, the ship's primary neural relay, the system that connected Anders's interface to the navigation controls, began to fail. Alarm signals cascaded through his consciousness as the connection weakened, threatening to leave them adrift in the heart of the nebula. "The primary relay is overloading," he called out, fighting to maintain control as his awareness of the ship began to fragment. "I'm losing the interface connection." Princess Cell pulled herself up from the deck, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. With grim determination, she made her way to the engineering access panel. "What do you need me to do?" "The backup relay needs to be physically rerouted," Anders instructed, his voice strained, as he struggled to hold the failing connection. "Panel 6, junction box A3. Without hesitation, she pried open the panel, exposing the complex array of circuitry beneath. Following Anders's rapid instructions, she began rerouting critical systems, her hands moving with surprising dexterity for someone with royal training. A sudden energy surge sent a power spike through the panel. Princess Cell cried out as electrical current arced across her hands, but she didn't withdraw, completing the crucial connection despite the pain. The backup relay engaged, stabilizing Anders' neural interface just as the primary system failed completely. "Got it," she gasped, cradling her burned hands. "Thank you," Anders acknowledged, feeling the connection strengthen once more. Through it, he sensed her injury, painful, but not severe, first-degree burns across her palms and fingers. 3 more minutes to the boundary. Those 3 minutes stretched into an eternity of constant adjustment and compensation. The Nomad groaned under the strain systems pushed far beyond their design parameters. When they finally broke free of the nebula's outer boundary, the relief was palpable throughout the ship. Anders began the process of disengaging from the neural interface, a procedure more complex after such deep integration. As his awareness contracted, he became aware of Princess Cell, still standing beside him, watching with concern, evident in her eyes. "You're bleeding," she observed quietly. Anders reached up, surprised to feel wetness at his nose and ears, neural feedback damage from the overtaxed interface. "It's nothing serious. Interface strain." "It doesn't look like nothing," she countered, retrieving a medical kit from beneath the console. With gentle efficiency, she cleaned the blood from his face, her recently burned hands moving carefully despite their obvious tenderness. "You didn't have to do that," Anders said, referring both to her current ministrations and her actions during the crisis. "Risking yourself to save the ship." "You risked yourself to save us," she replied simply. "Twice now." Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. The moment was interrupted by Princess Elixa's arrival, her usual composed demeanor slightly disheveled after the confrontation in the cargo hold. "Captain Vidian has the situation contained," she reported. "Lion and 2 accomplices are secured. 1 guard sustained moderate injuries." "And the Corvalian device?" Anders asked. "Deactivated but intact for investigation." Elixa confirmed, noting her sister's burned hands with a frown. "You're injured." "It's minor," Princess Cell dismissed. "Commander Cade suffered neural feedback." Princess Elixa's analytical gaze assessed Anders with clinical precision. "The interface shouldn't have caused physical damage, unless you pushed well beyond safety protocols." "I did what was necessary," Anders replied, setting course for Helios Outpost. "We didn't have many options." "No," she agreed thoughtfully. "We didn't. Your actions saved all our lives, Commander. The Empire will not forget this service. Anders didn't respond, focusing instead on the journey back to Helios. The Nomad had sustained significant damage during their escape from the Nebula hull breaches, sealed by emergency systems engines, operating at reduced efficiency life support, strained by the number of passengers. They would make it back, but the ship would require extensive repairs. As Helios Outpost appeared on the long-range sensors, Anders became aware of additional vessels in orbit, 3 Imperial cruisers, and High Counselor Thalon's personal diplomatic ship. It seemed the Empire had mobilized significant resources once the princess's predicament became known. Quite the welcoming committee, he observed dryly. High Counselor Thalon doesn't appreciate being defied, Princess Elixa noted. Even by royalty. Anders guided the battered Nomad toward the station, establishing communication with Imperial control. Helios approach. This is Commander Cade aboard the Nomad, requesting emergency docking clearance, transporting royal passengers and prisoners. Clearance granted, Commander, came the immediate response. Proceed to Imperial Dock 1. Medical and security teams standing by. The docking procedure completed without incident, the Nomad settling into the secure berth, with a final shudder of its overtaxed systems. As the airlock cycled open, Anders rose from the pilot's chair, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. The neural interface had demanded more from him than ever before, leaving him drained physically and mentally. High Counselor Thalon waited beyond the airlock, flanked by Imperial guards and medical personnel. His expression betrayed nothing as the princesses emerged, first followed by Captain Vidian, escorting the restrained prisoners. Your Highnesses, Thalon greeted them formally. The Empire rejoices at your safe return. Thanks entirely to Commander Cade, Princess Cell stated firmly. Thalon inclined his head slightly toward Anders, who stood at the rear of the group. The commander performed as expected. Above and beyond expectation, Princess Elixa corrected her tone, allowing no contradiction. We will discuss his promised reinstatement immediately. Anders blinked in surprise. In the chaos of the rescue mission, he had almost forgotten Thalon's initial offer restoration of his rank and record in exchange for the princess's safe return. Of course, Your Highness, Thalon agreed smoothly. But first there is another matter requiring attention, a matter of significant historical and diplomatic importance. Princess Cell tensed visibly. This is hardly the time, High Counselor. On the contrary, Thalon countered, the successful resolution of this crisis provides the perfect opportunity to address the Covenant of Preservation. Anders looked between them in confusion. The what? An ancient agreement, Princess Elixa explained reluctantly. Dating back to the founding of the Athetheran Empire, a covenant between the royal house and certain historically significant bloodlines. Thalon stepped forward, his expression solemn. Commander Anders Cade, your genetic lineage traces directly to Avery Cade, who saved Emperor Athelin I during the Formation Wars. In gratitude, the Emperor established a covenant that should a Cade ever save royal lives at great personal risk, the debt would be repaid through permanent alliance with the royal house. Anders stared at him in disbelief. What are you saying? The covenant stipulates marriage, Princess Cell stated bluntly, a union between the royal savior and the saved. That's absurd, Anders objected. That covenant, if it ever existed, would be thousands of years old. 3,417 years to be precise, Princess Elixa confirmed, yet still binding under imperial law. Anders looked between the royal twins, realization dawning. That's why Thalon recruited me specifically, not just for my piloting abilities. Your abilities were the primary consideration, Thalon insisted. But yes, your bloodline made you the ideal candidate when the situation arose. Anders felt manipulation closing around him like a trap. I won't be forced into a political marriage because of some ancient covenant. I fulfilled my end of our agreement. I rescued the princesses and their crew. You promised reinstatement. Which you shall have, Thalon assured him, along with elevation to the royal house, Many would consider it an honor beyond imagining. I'm not many, Anders retorted. And I didn't agree to this. Princess Cell stepped forward unexpectedly. High Counselor Commander Cade and I require privacy to discuss this matter. As the primary beneficiary of his heroism, I believe Imperial Protocol grants me this right. Thalon hesitated before inclining his head in reluctant acknowledgement. The observation lounge is secured for royal use. Captain Vidian will ensure your privacy. Princess Cell gestured for Anders to follow her, leaving Princess Elixa to oversee the processing of prisoners with Thalon. They walked in silence through the station's corridors, Captain Vidian maintaining a respectful distance behind them. The observation lounge offered a panoramic view of space beyond Helios Outpost, the swirling mass of the Vortex Nebula, visible as a distant, beautiful chaos on the horizon. When the door sealed behind them, Princess Cell turned to Anders with an unexpected smile. You look as though you've been sentenced to execution rather than royal marriage, she observed. Anders ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I didn't sign up for this, Your Highness. I agreed to a rescue mission, not a lifetime political commitment. I understand, she replied, surprising him with her candor. And I have no desire for an unwilling husband. Then why are we having this conversation? Anders asked. Surely you can simply refuse. Princess Cell's expression grew more serious. Imperial law doesn't work that way. The covenant is binding on both parties. To simply refuse would create a constitutional crisis that could destabilize the entire political structure. So I'm trapped, Anders concluded bitterly. Not necessarily, she countered. The covenant requires an alliance, but the nature of that alliance has some flexibility in interpretation. Traditional marriage is the expected form, but there are historical precedents for alternatives. Anders studied her curiously. What kind of alternatives? Formalized partnerships of various kinds, she explained. Military alliances, scientific collaborations, exploration compacts. Her expression became thoughtful. My sister, for instance, would likely prefer a research partnership to further her studies of the nebula's energy patterns. And you, Anders asked suddenly, very aware of the intelligent, capable woman before him, a woman who had worked alongside him to save their ship, who had risked injury to help him maintain control, who now sought to offer him choices rather than commands. I find myself intrigued by the possibility of exploration, Princess Cell admitted. The nebula is only one of many frontiers that remain poorly understood. A joint expedition would satisfy the covenant, while allowing both of us considerable freedom. Anders considered her words carefully. You're offering me a way out while still honoring your traditions. I'm offering us both a path forward, she corrected. One that acknowledges what we've already begun. Which is a partnership based on mutual respect and shared experience, she replied simply. Something rare enough in arranged royal alliances. Anders turned to gaze out at the nebula, its swirling patterns reminding him of the currents he had navigated through instinct and determination. An expedition partnership with a royal princess would certainly restore his standing and provide resources beyond anything he could access alone. More importantly, it would be a choice, rather than a command, something he had fought for throughout his career. I'll need time to consider, he said finally. Of course, she agreed. Though I should warn you that High Counselor Thalon will press for an immediate traditional resolution. He believes in absolute adherence to historical precedent. And what do you believe in, Your Highness? Anders asked, genuinely curious. Her eyes met his without hesitation. I believe in finding new paths through old challenges, much like navigating a nebula that everyone else considers impassable. For the first time since their meeting, Anders smiled genuinely. We should return before Thalon sends a search party. Princess Cell nodded, moving toward the door. Whatever you decide, Commander, know that your actions have earned my gratitude and respect. The Empire may have discarded you, but it was mistaken to do so. They rejoined the others in the station's formal reception chamber, where Princess Elixa was deep in conversation with a team of Imperial scientists about the Corvallian device recovered from the Nomad. High Counselor Thalon approached immediately, his expression expectant. "I trust your discussion was productive," he inquired. "Most illuminating," Princess Cell replied diplomatically. "Commander Cade and I have explored several potential interpretations of the Covenant obligations." Thalon frowned slightly. "The traditional interpretation has served the Empire for millennia, Your Highness." "Tradition must adapt to remain relevant," she countered smoothly. "The commander's unique abilities and experience would be wasted in a purely ceremonial role." Before Thalon could respond, Princess Elixa joined them. "High Counselor, preliminary analysis confirms the Corvallian device was designed to extract my research data, while simultaneously marking potential extraction targets with tracking nodes." "Industrial espionage," Thalon concluded grimly. "Potentially an act of war," Princess Elixa corrected. "Had they succeeded in abducting us using the tracking nodes?" Anders glanced at Princess Cell, remembering the device Lion had planted on her. "They weren't just after the research data. They wanted the researchers too." "Precisely," Princess Elixa confirmed. "Which makes the matter of the Covenant even more pressing. A formal alliance would strengthen our position in the inevitable diplomatic confrontation with Corvallian authorities." Anders found himself cornered once again, Imperial politics closing around him, like the Nebula's chaotic energies. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." "But you will," Thalon stated with certainty. "Your sense of duty won't allow otherwise, Commander. I selected you for this mission, knowing your character, as well as your abilities." The manipulation was becoming increasingly transparent, but Anders recognized the truth in Thalon's assessment. Despite his bitterness toward the Empire that had discarded him, he couldn't simply walk away from responsibilities that affected galactic stability. "I propose a compromise," Princess Elixa announced unexpectedly. "A dual Covenant fulfillment." All eyes turned to her in surprise. Even Princess Cell seemed taken aback by her sister's intervention. "The Commander possesses unique neural interface abilities that would significantly advance my Nebula research," Princess Elixa explained. Simultaneously, his piloting skills would complement Princess Cell's interest in frontier exploration. "I propose a formal research partnership with myself and an expedition compact with my sister." "Two separate Covenant bonds?" Thalon asked incredulously. "Unprecedented." "As was a successful rescue from the Vortex Nebula," Princess Elixa countered. "Unprecedented circumstances call for unprecedented solutions." Anders looked between the royal twins, sensing an unexpected alliance. They had discussed this possibility without him, he realized perhaps, even before the rescue mission began. "The Council of Elders would never approve such an arrangement," Thalon objected. "They will if we present it as the only viable option," Princess Cell suggested. "The alternative being my complete rejection of any Covenant fulfillment." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Thalon's expression hardened as he recognized the political maneuvering at play. "This requires careful consideration. The Covenant is not to be treated lightly." "Nor are the wishes of those bound by it," Princess Elixa reminded him. "The Commander has earned the right to determine the nature of his service to the Empire." Anders found himself in the unusual position of having royal advocates after years of Imperial rejection. The irony wasn't lost on him. "I'm willing to consider both proposals," he stated cautiously, "provided I maintain command of the Nomad and operational autonomy." "Reasonable terms," Princess Cell agreed immediately. "To be formalized in the Covenant documents." Thalon recognized defeat when he saw it. "I will draft the necessary modifications for Council review," he conceded, "but the final decision remains with the Elders." "Of course," Princess Elixa acknowledged. "We would expect no less." As Thalon withdrew to begin the complex diplomatic process, Anders found himself alone with the royal twins. "That was unexpected," he admitted. "Political maneuvering is our birthright, Commander," Princess Elixa said with the faintest hint of amusement. though I admit this particular solution offers advantages I hadn't initially considered. Your neural sensitivity to energy patterns could revolutionize our understanding of the nebula, Princess Cell elaborated, while simultaneously opening new frontiers for exploration, and conveniently satisfying an ancient covenant without forcing anyone into an unwanted marriage, Anders added wryly. Princess Cell's expression softened. Not unwanted, perhaps, simply premature. The implication wasn't lost on Anders, but before he could respond, Captain Vidian approached with urgent news. Your Highness's commander. Long-range sensors have detected 3 Corvallian vessels on intercept course with Helios outpost. They're demanding the release of their citizens being held against their will. The saboteurs, Princess Elixa concluded grimly. They're attempting to create a diplomatic incident to cover their espionage. Standard Corvallian tactics, Princess Cell agreed. Force a confrontation, then claim victimization. Anders assessed the situation swiftly. How long until they arrive? Approximately 2 hours at current velocity, Vidian reported. The Imperial cruisers in orbit outnumber them, Princess Elixa observed. But direct confrontation would have significant diplomatic consequences. What if we avoid confrontation entirely? Anders suggested an idea forming. The Nomad can be repaired within the hour for short-range travel. We could transfer the prisoners to the Imperial flagship and create a diversion to allow it to withdraw, while the Corvallians are focused elsewhere. What kind of diversion? Princess Cell asked, interest evident in her voice. Anders smiled slightly. Something impossibly attention-grabbing, like a damaged ship making a reckless approach to the Vortex Nebula. Understanding dawned in Princess Cell's eyes, with neural interface signatures suggesting royal passengers aboard. Exactly, Anders confirmed. The Corvallians will have to split their forces at minimum. And at best they'll commit entirely to pursuit revealing their true intentions, Princess Elixa concluded. Elegant commander. Risky, Captain Vidian cautioned. The Nomad sustained significant damage during our extraction, but is still the only ship with a pilot capable of navigating the nebula if necessary, Anders pointed out. We don't need to enter the nebula, just convince them we might. Princess Cell nodded decisively. I volunteer to accompany the commander on this mission. Absolutely not, Vidian objected immediately. The risk is unacceptable. On the contrary, she countered. My presence makes the diversion credible. The Corvallians will have detected the tracking node they placed on me earlier. They'll believe I'm aboard, because their own technology will confirm it. Anders hadn't considered that angle. The containment field might not have completely blocked the signal. She's right, her coat with the attached tracker would make perfect bait. Princess Elixa studied her sister for a long moment before nodding. The strategic advantage is significant. I will coordinate with the Imperial flagship while you prepare the Nomad. The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. The Nomad received emergency repairs, focused on engine functionality and life support, while the prisoners were covertly transferred to the Imperial flagship under heavy guard. Princess Cell's tracked garment was prepared as the centerpiece of their deception, its signal deliberately amplified to ensure Corvallian sensors would detect it. As Anders completed the pre-flight checks, Princess Cell joined him in the cockpit, now dressed in practical attire, more suited to potential combat than royal appearances. The Corvallians have accelerated, she reported. They'll reach Helios in less than an hour. Perfect timing, Anders replied, activating the neural interface. The familiar expansion of consciousness followed, though muted compared to previous connections, a safety limitation given his recent neural feedback injuries. We'll launch in 5 minutes. Proceed toward the nebula at reduced speed. The Imperial flagship will wait until the Corvallians commit to pursuit before breaking orbit. Princess Cell took the co-pilot seat, watching as he worked. Captain Vidian strongly objected to my participation, she mentioned casually. He seemed to think I had ulterior motives. Anders glanced at her curiously. Do you? Perhaps, she admitted with a slight smile, though none that compromised the mission. The Nomad detached from Helios outpost precisely on schedule, its damaged systems giving a convincing impression of a vessel struggling to maintain functionality. Through the neural interface, Anders projected specific energy signatures that would register on Corvallian sensors as matching the Royal Transport protocols. Nomad, this is Helios Control, came the transmission part of their carefully orchestrated deception. Your departure is unauthorized. Return to dock immediately. Unable to comply, Anders responded, adding static to the communication. Navigation systems compromised. Attempting emergency protocols. He guided the ship on an erratic course toward the Nebula movements, designed to suggest damaged control systems, rather than deliberate evasion. Princess Cell monitored the long-range sensors, tracking the approaching Corvallian vessels. "They've detected us," she reported. 2 vessels altering course to intercept, the third maintaining approach to Helios. "Better than expected," Anders noted. "They've committed the majority of their force to the pursuit." The Nomad continued its apparent struggle toward the Nebula engines, occasionally sputtering for effect. Anders adjusted course repeatedly, creating the impression of a ship fighting to maintain control. "Corvallian lead vessel hailing us," Princess Cell announced. Anders nodded. "Let's hear what they have to say." The communication system crackled to life with a stern Corvallian voice. "Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Rizak of the Corvallian Security Fleet. Your ship is on an unsafe trajectory. Prepare to be boarded for emergency assistance." "Decline their generous offer," Anders suggested dryly. Princess Cell activated the response channel. "Corvallian vessel, this is an Imperial transport experiencing system failures. We neither request nor require your intervention. Any attempt to board will be considered a hostile action against the Athetheran Empire." "Our sensors indicate you are on collision course with the Vortex Nebula," Rizak countered. "We are obligated under interstellar navigation protocols to prevent loss of life." "How thoughtful of them," Anders murmured, adjusting course to bring them closer to the nebula's boundary. Through the neural interface, he monitored the Corvallian vessel's positions. They were closing rapidly, attempting to flank the Nomad on both sides. "Imperial flagship has broken orbit," Princess Cell reported, quietly reading the encoded transmission from her sister. "Proceeding to rendezvous point with prisoners secured. Time to increase the stakes." Anders decided, deliberately venting plasma from the Nomad's port engine, a controlled release that would appear as catastrophic damage to pursuing sensors. The reaction was immediate. The Corvallian vessels accelerated emergency frequencies, flooding with concerned transmissions about the failing ship and its royal passenger. "They're deploying tractor systems," Princess Cell warned, "attempting to capture rather than destroy." "Exactly as we hoped." Anders confirmed, initiating the next phase of their plan. With precise timing, he activated the Nomad's emergency thrusters, sending the ship into a controlled spin that would disrupt tractor beam targeting. Simultaneously, he released a burst of concentrated energy directly toward the Nebula boundary. The effect was spectacular. The energy burst collided with the nebula's outer layer, creating a cascading reaction that rippled across the visible boundary. To observers, it appeared as though the Nomad had triggered a dangerous instability in the nebula itself. "Corvallian vessels are breaking off pursuit," Princess Cell announced, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. "They're retreating to a safe distance." "And the flagship?" Anders asked, maintaining the Nomad's erratic course. "Successfully away, transmitting confirmation of secure withdrawal." Anders nodded, beginning the process of stabilizing their flight path. "Phase 1 complete. Now we just need to maintain the charade long enough for the flagship to reach Imperial space." "Approximately 6 hours," Princess Cell calculated. "Can we evade the Corvallians that long?" "We don't need to evade them," Anders explained, a plan already forming. "We need to keep them focused on us without allowing capture. I suggest we lead them on a merry chase around the nebula's perimeter." Princess Cell's eyes lit with understanding. "Using the boundary instabilities to prevent them from getting too close." "Exactly," Anders confirmed. "They want to capture rather than destroy, which gives us the advantage. and they believe you're aboard, which makes them extremely motivated to avoid any outcome that might harm you. A motivation you share, I hope, she commented lightly. Anders glanced at her, catching the subtle challenge in her tone. I haven't forgotten that you risked your safety to help navigate when the systems were failing, he acknowledged. That's not something I've experienced often, someone willing to face danger alongside me rather than ordering from safety. The royal house of Athetherin has many traditions, Princess Sel replied. Some more worthy than others. Leadership through shared risk is one I personally value. Their conversation paused as a renewed hail came from the Corvallian vessels, now maintaining a cautious distance, but still clearly intent on interception. Disabled vessel, we are monitoring severe structural integrity issues with your ship, Captain Rizak's voice declared. For your own safety, power down, and prepare for emergency evacuation. Princess Sel raised an eyebrow at Anders. They're persistent. Let's give them something new to worry about, he suggested, guiding the Nomad closer to a particularly active section of the Nebula boundary. Through the neural interface, he could sense the energy patterns shifting and flowing, creating natural disturbances that would effectively mask their movements if used properly. For the next 4 hours, Anders executed a series of increasingly complex maneuvers along the nebula's edge. Each time the Corvallian vessels attempted to close distance, he would trigger a controlled reaction in the boundary, creating hazardous conditions that forced them to retreat. Through it all, Princess Sel monitored communications and assisted with system management, displaying a technical proficiency that belied her royal status. You're remarkably skilled for someone who supposedly received a traditional imperial education, Anders observed during a brief lull in Corvallian pursuit attempts. My official education focused on diplomacy, history, and governance, she acknowledged. But I've always had extracurricular interests. Ship systems, navigation, frontier exploration. Against imperial expectations, she smiled slightly. Let's say I was encouraged to pursue more traditional princely interests. My sister found her rebellion in science. I found mine in practical skills that might actually prove useful beyond palace walls. Like helping a disgraced pilot navigate through a crisis, Anders suggested. Exactly like that, she confirmed, meeting his gaze directly. Their moment of connection was interrupted by urgent alerts from the long-range sensors. Additional vessels approaching Princess Sel reported checking the readings. 3 more Corvallian ships. They're attempting to surround us. Anders assessed the situation quickly. Their diversion had succeeded in drawing attention away from the Imperial flagship, but now they faced significantly greater challenges in maintaining their own freedom. The flagship reports they're safely beyond Corvallian jurisdiction. Princess Sel added relief evident in her voice. Mission accomplished. They advise immediate withdrawal to rendezvous coordinates. Easier said than done with 5 hostile ships converging on our position, Anders noted grimly. He studied the tactical display, weighing their options. Standard evasion would likely fail against superior numbers and their ships' compromised systems. We need something unexpected, Princess Sel suggested following his train of thought. Anders nodded slowly, a daring plan forming in his mind. Something no Corvallian captain would willingly follow. Princess Sel's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The nebula itself. Just inside the boundary, Anders clarified. Not deep penetration. A controlled insertion that appears desperate from the outside, followed by traversing along the inner edge to a different exit point. Risky, she acknowledged. But they won't follow us in. Not after witnessing our earlier difficulties with the boundary. Anders reconnected fully to the neural interface, preparing for the complex navigation ahead. This will get rough. The interface strain might trigger more neural feedback. I'll monitor your vital signs, Princess Sel promised, moving to the medical station, and intervene if the readings become critical. With determination and precise timing, Anders executed a series of maneuvers designed to make their entry into the nebula appear desperate and uncontrolled. The pursuing Corvallian vessels fell for the deception, believing they were witnessing a ship in final catastrophic failure, rather than executing a calculated strategic withdrawal. The moment the Nomad crossed the Nebula boundary, alarms blared throughout the ship. Radiation levels spiked, sensors struggled to maintain coherence, and the hull creaked under sudden stress. Through the neural interface, Anders felt every fluctuation and strain, guiding the ship with instinctive adjustments that no automated system could match. Corvallian vessels holding position outside the boundary. Princess Cell reported maintaining remarkable calm despite the chaos surrounding them. As expected, they're unwilling to follow. Anders didn't respond verbally. His concentration focused entirely on navigating the treacherous energy patterns. Even with his unique sensitivity, traveling within the nebula required total commitment, every minute adjustment critical to their survival. Time lost meaning as they proceeded along the inner boundary, the external universe reduced to swirling energy and radiation that only Anders could interpret through the neural connection. Princess Cell maintained a careful watch on both his vital signs and the ship's systems, making small adjustments to life support and power distribution as needed. When Anders finally guided the Nomad back across the boundary nearly 2 hours later, they emerged far from their entry point and far from Corvallian pursuit. The nebula had once again served as both danger and sanctuary. Anders disconnected from the deep neural link, gasping as awareness contracted to normal parameters. This time, the neural feedback was more severe, not just blood from his nose and ears, but tremors in his hands and blurred vision. Princess Cell moved quickly to his side, medical scanner in hand. Neural pathway inflammation, she diagnosed, administering a stabilizing compound without hesitation. You pushed the interface beyond safe parameters. Had to, Anders managed fighting to maintain consciousness as the medication took effect. No other choice. And now I have no choice but to relieve you of duty, she stated firmly, helping him from the pilot's chair. Your nervous system needs time to recover. The ship, he began to protest, can maintain basic navigation on automated systems, now that we're clear of the nebula, she assured him. The rendezvous point is programmed. Rest, Commander. That's a royal order if you require one. Too exhausted to argue, Anders allowed her to guide him to the small medical alcove. As the stabilizing compounds continued to work through his system, bringing blessed relief from the neural fire that seemed to consume his consciousness, he found himself studying Princess Cell with new appreciation. You've done this before, he observed, noting the confidence with which she operated the medical equipment. Frontier expeditions often lack proper medical personnel, she explained. I learned out of necessity. These expeditions, Anders asked carefully, official or unofficial? A slight smile touched her lips. Let's call them discretionary royal activities. My sister focuses on advancing scientific understanding. I focus on advancing our practical knowledge of what lies beyond established territories. The Empire allows this. The Empire tolerates it, she corrected. Primarily because I'm careful to deliver valuable discoveries that justify the occasional breach of protocol. Despite his condition, Anders found himself laughing softly. So, the prim and proper Ethetheran royal house harbors a rebel explorer and a scientific revolutionary as its heirs. No wonder Thalon looks perpetually stressed. Tradition and innovation need not be enemies. Princess Cell suggested checking his neural readings with professional efficiency. The most resilient empires evolve while honoring their foundations. Is that what you're offering me? Anders asked, suddenly serious. Evolution, rather than revolution. A way to honor the covenant while creating something new. She met his gaze directly, her royal composure giving way to genuine emotion. I'm offering a partnership between equals, Commander. Your skills and mine complementing each other in exploration of frontiers, both physical and political. And your sister's research proposal. Equally sincere, Princess Cell assured him. Elixa recognizes the value of your neural sensitivity to her work. The dual covenant would allow you to contribute to both our endeavors without being bound exclusively to either. Anders considered her words carefully, recognizing the unprecedented opportunity being presented. not just redemption or restoration of his former status, but evolution into something entirely new, something that honored his abilities while respecting his independence. It would change everything, he acknowledged. Only if you wish it to, she countered. The covenant can be fulfilled through collaboration without requiring you to abandon your own path. Further conversation was interrupted by the proximity alert, signaling their approach to the rendezvous coordinates. Princess Cell returned to the cockpit, engaging manual control, with the practiced ease of someone far more familiar with ship operations than most royalty. The Imperial flagship awaited them, its imposing silhouette a stark contrast to the Nomad's battered form. As they docked, Anders managed to stand with Princess Cell's assistance, determined to walk rather than be carried from his own ship, despite his weakened condition. High Counselor Thalon and Princess Elixa met them at the airlock, concern evident on the princess's face as she observed Anders's state. Neural interface damage, she diagnosed immediately. Severe strain patterns. He needs proper medical attention. Already administered preliminary treatment, Princess Cell informed her sister. But he requires specialized care. Which he shall have, Princess Elixa assured them both. Our medical facilities are prepared. Thalon stepped forward, assessing the situation with a calculating gaze. The diversion succeeded admirably. The Corvallian vessels have withdrawn to their territory, claiming the entire incident was merely a navigation assistance attempt. Of course they would, Anders commented dryly, wincing, as a fresh wave of neural feedback sent pain lancing through his skull. Can't admit they were attempting to abduct royal princesses. The diplomatic implications will be addressed appropriately, Thalon stated. For now, your health takes priority, Commander. The Empire does not forget those who serve with such distinction. Anders allowed himself to be guided to the Imperial Medical Bay, where advanced neural regeneration technology awaited. Princess Cell remained by his side throughout the transfer, her presence a silent reminder of promises made and possibilities yet to be explored. The next 3 days passed in a blur of medical treatments and gradually diminishing pain as Anders's neural pathways healed under the Empire's advanced care. Princess Cell visited regularly, sometimes accompanied by her sister, other times alone. Their conversations ranged from technical discussions of Nebula navigation to philosophical debates about freedom versus duty. On the 4th day, Anders awoke feeling substantially recovered. He sat on the edge of the medical bed, testing his returning strength, when Princess Cell entered. The doctors report your recovery is proceeding exceptionally well, she greeted him. Neural pathways regenerating cleanly. I feel almost human again, Anders confirmed, standing carefully. Has there been any word about the Nomad? Undergoing repairs at the Imperial shipyard, she reported. The damage was significant but reparable. Captain Vidian personally oversees the work. Anders nodded, pleasantly surprised by the captain's involvement. The stern Royal Guard had shown unexpected respect following their shared ordeal in the Nebula. And the Covenant negotiations? He asked, addressing the question that had hovered at the edges of their previous conversations. Princess Cell moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars before responding. The Council of Elders has agreed to review our proposed modification. Deliberations begin tomorrow. That quickly, Anders was surprised. Imperial bureaucracy typically moved at a glacial pace. My sister can be remarkably persuasive when scientific advancement is at stake, Princess Cell explained with a hint of amusement. And I may have suggested that frontier exploration could yield valuable resources for the Empire. Anders joined her at the viewport, standing close enough to sense her presence without quite breaching royal protocol. And what happens if the Council rejects the modification? She turned to face him directly. Then we find another path. The royal twins of Athetherin are not without resources or influence. I'm beginning to understand that, Anders acknowledged with a slight smile. Your determination is impressive. A family trait, she replied lightly, though expressed differently in each generation. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Anders found himself studying her profile, noting the strength and intelligence reflected in her features, qualities easily overlooked by those who saw only royal status. "Commander," she said finally, "regardless of the Council's decision, I want you to know that your actions have earned my deepest respect. Not just your piloting skills, though, they are extraordinary, but your willingness to risk everything for people you had every reason to resent." "I didn't do it for the Empire," Anders admitted, "or even for the Covenant." "Why then?" she asked softly. Anders considered the question carefully. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because skills mean nothing if they're not used when needed most." He paused, then added, "And perhaps because after years of exile, I needed to prove something to myself." "And did you prove whatever you needed to—" "I think," Anders replied slowly, "I discovered something more important than proof. I found purpose again." Princess Cell's expression softened. "Purpose is not insignificant, Commander. Many live entire lives without finding theirs." "Anders," he corrected gently, "if we're discussing potential partnerships, perhaps formality isn't necessary." A smile touched her lips. "Anders, then. And you may call me Cell when protocol doesn't demand otherwise." Their moment of connection was interrupted by a medical droid, announcing the arrival of High Counselor Thalon. The counselor entered moments later, his formal attire suggesting official business. "Commander Cade," he greeted Anders. "You've recovered well. Excellent. The Council has requested your presence at tomorrow's deliberations." Anders straightened instinctively. "I'll be ready." "The proceedings begin at the 10th hour, Thalon instructed. "Traditional formal attire will be provided." He turned to Princess Cell. "Your Highness Princess Elixa requests your presence for preliminary testimony preparation." "Of course," she acknowledged. With a final, meaningful glance at Anders, she departed, leaving him alone with the High Counselor. Thalon studied Anders with an expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. "You've created quite the diplomatic situation, Commander. The first Covenant activation in 7 generations, and you propose an unprecedented modification." "The circumstances are unprecedented," Anders pointed out, "as you yourself noted when recruiting me." "Indeed," Thalon conceded. "Though I admit I did not anticipate this particular outcome." "What did you anticipate?" "A more traditional resolution. The princesses have always been independent-minded, but they typically recognize the value of established protocols." Anders raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps they recognize the value of effective partnerships over symbolic gestures." Thalon's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested reassessment. "You may be right, Commander. The Empire endures not through rigid adherence to the past, but through thoughtful adaptation to changing realities." "That sounds suspiciously like support for our proposal," Anders observed cautiously. "Let us say," Thalon replied, with the faintest hint of a smile, "that I serve the Empire's best interests as I understand them. Sometimes, that requires recognizing when tradition must evolve." With that cryptic statement, the High Counselor departed, leaving Anders to contemplate the shifting political currents that seemed to flow around him, currents as complex and unpredictable as those within the Vortex Nebula. The council chamber of the Imperial flagship reflected the grandeur of Athetheran architecture, with soaring arches and ancient symbols etched into walls of precious metals. Anders stood before the assembled elders, dressed in the formal attire, provided a modified Imperial uniform that acknowledged his unique status as neither fully military nor fully civilian. Princess Elixa and Princess Cell sat to one side of the chamber, their royal regalia emphasizing their position while maintaining the appearance of neutrality during the proceedings. High Counselor Thalon stood opposite them, representing Imperial tradition and protocol. Commander Anders Cade, the Chief Elder, began her voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. "You stand before this council as both savior and supplicant. The Covenant of Preservation has been invoked for the first time in 7 generations, binding you to the royal house through ancient obligation." Anders inclined his head respectfully, but remained silent as tradition demanded. The standard resolution would be immediate integration into the royal family through marriage to one of the saved, the chief elder continued. However, an alternative proposal has been presented. She gestured to a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber, showing the dual covenant modification in formal legal language. This council must determine whether such modification serves the Empire's interests, while honoring the sacred covenant established by our founders, she explained. We will hear testimony from all concerned parties. What followed was hours of formal presentation, questioning, and debate. Princess Elixa detailed the scientific value of Anders's neural interface abilities in studying the nebula's energy patterns. Princess Cell outlined the potential for frontier exploration and resource discovery through joint expeditions. High Counselor Thalon, to Anders's surprise, presented a balanced assessment that acknowledged both traditional expectations and practical realities. When Anders himself was called to testify, he spoke with simple honesty about his experiences in the Nebula and his vision for potential service to the Empire, not as a symbolic consort, but as an active contributor with unique skills and perspective. The Covenant speaks of alliance, he pointed out. True alliance comes not from ceremony but from shared purpose and mutual respect. What I offer is not less than marriage, but more committed service in areas where I can provide greatest value. As the deliberations continued, Anders observed the council members' reactions, noting the division between traditionalists who valued historical precedent and progressives who recognized the practical advantages of the proposed modification. The outcome remained uncertain as the final vote approached. When the chief elder called for decision, a hush fell over the chamber. Each council member registered their vote through the ancient ceremonial interface, a blend of advanced technology and ritual symbolism that characterized so much of Athetheran culture. The council has reached determination, the chief elder announced when all votes were recorded. By majority consensus, the proposed modification to the Covenant of Preservation is approved. A murmur ran through the assembled witnesses, not quite shock, but certainly surprise at the relatively swift acceptance of such an unprecedented change. Anders maintained his composure, though relief washed through him like a physical sensation. Commander Anders Cade, the chief elder, continued, You are hereby bound to Princess Elixa through covenant of scientific collaboration, and to Princess Cell through covenant of exploration partnership. These dual bonds satisfy the requirements of the ancient agreement, while establishing new precedent for future covenant fulfillment. Princess Cell caught Anders's eye across the chamber, the slightest smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Princess Elixa nodded approvingly, her analytical mind already contemplating the research possibilities their partnership would enable. There remains one final matter, the chief elder stated. The restoration of your imperial standing as promised by High Counselor Thalon upon successful completion of the rescue mission. Thalon stepped forward, producing a formal imperial decree. By authority vested in the office of the High Counselor, I hereby restore Commander Anders Cade to full military rank and standing with all rights and privileges thereof. Furthermore, in recognition of extraordinary service beyond duty, I confer the additional title of Royal Navigator, with authorization to operate independently while fulfilling covenant obligations. The title was unexpected, a new designation created specifically for his unique position. Anders accepted the formal decree with the traditional bow, understanding the political maneuvering behind Thalon's gesture. The High Counselor had found a way to honor the agreement while maintaining appropriate oversight of a valuable asset. As the formal proceedings concluded, Anders found himself surrounded by well-wishers and curious officials eager to establish connection with the Empire's newest dignitary. Through the crowd, he glimpsed Princess Cell, watching with amusement as he navigated the social complexities with the same careful attention he had given to the nebula's energy patterns. When he finally extricated himself from the gathering, he found both princesses waiting in a private antechamber adjacent to the council hall. "Congratulations, Royal Navigator." Princess Elixa greeted him with formal correctness that didn't quite mask her satisfaction. "The Council's decision opens extraordinary research possibilities and exploration opportunities," Princess Cell added warmly. "Though I suspect you'll need time to adjust to your new status before we begin either venture." Anders nodded, feeling the weight of the day's events settling upon him. "It's a significant change from exile on Helios Outpost." "Change often arrives unexpectedly," Princess Elixa observed philosophically. "The Nebula research began as a standard energy analysis and resulted in diplomatic crisis, military confrontation, and historical precedent revision." Speaking of the research, Anders inquired, "What will happen with the Corvallian situation? Their attempt to abduct you both can't go unanswered." "Diplomatic channels are addressing the matter," Princess Elixa explained. "The evidence from Lion and his accomplices is compelling. Corvallian authorities have already begun distancing themselves from the unauthorized actions of rogue operatives. A convenient fiction that allows both sides to avoid open conflict," Princess Cell added with slight cynicism. "Though their access to Nebula research will be significantly restricted moving forward." Anders understood the political realities at play. Open confrontation between major powers benefited no one, while carefully managed tensions and strategic advantages maintained balance. His new position would place him squarely within these complex dynamics. "And the Nomad?" he asked, returning to the more immediate concern. "How soon until she's spaceworthy?" "Another week for essential repairs," Princess Cell replied. "Though Captain Vidian has recommended several upgrades that would extend the timeline if approved." "Which they will be," Princess Elixa assured him. "Our first joint research expedition is scheduled for 3 weeks hence. The Nomad will require enhanced sensor arrays and additional shielding." Anders raised an eyebrow. "You've already planned the expedition." "Preliminary framework only," Princess Elixa clarified. "Detailed planning awaits your input, of course." "And my exploration partnership," Anders asked, turning to Princess Cell. "Begins with a survey of the nebula's outer boundaries," she replied. "Areas traditional navigation cannot access, but where your neural interface abilities would prove valuable. After that," her eyes brightened with genuine enthusiasm, "the Cerulean expanse awaits exploration, as does the Magellan Drift. Both regions contain potential resources and phenomena of significant interest." Anders found himself responding to her excitement, despite his typical reserve. These were regions he had dreamed of exploring, frontier territories that promised discovery and challenge beyond the constraints of imperial bureaucracy. "It seems my schedule is filling rapidly," he observed, though without complaint. The prospect of purposeful activity, after years of aimless exile, held undeniable appeal. "Too rapidly?" Princess Cell asked perceptively. Anders considered the question, weighing the dramatic changes to his circumstances against the opportunities presented. "No," he decided. "Not too rapidly. Just different than I expected when Thalon approached me in that bar on Helios." "Life seldom follows expected trajectories," Princess Elixa noted, "particularly when one navigates paths others consider impossible." The subtle reference to his nebula piloting brought a smile to Anders's face. "True enough. And speaking of navigation, I should check on the Nomad's repairs." "I'll accompany you," Princess Cell offered immediately. "I'm curious about the modifications Captain Vidian has proposed." Princess Elixa excused herself to attend to research preparations, leaving Anders and Princess Cell to make their way to the Imperial shipyard where the Nomad underwent reconstruction. As they walked, Anders became aware of the changed responses from those they encountered, the formal deference now extended to him alongside the princess. The curious glances, the respectful distance maintained by security personnel. "Does it ever feel confining?" he asked quietly. The constant awareness of position and protocol. Princess Cell considered the question thoughtfully. "Yes," she admitted. "Which is precisely why I value my exploration missions. Beyond imperial space titles, matter less than competence and courage." "Yet you always return," Because duty and desire need not be opposing forces, she explained. I serve the Empire best by bringing knowledge from beyond its boundaries. The royal title provides resources and authority that make exploration possible. Anders nodded, understanding the pragmatic balance she had established between obligation and freedom. Perhaps a similar balance awaited him in his new dual covenant role, the structure providing purpose, while the autonomy allowed for genuine contribution. They reached the shipyard to find the nomads surrounded by Imperial technicians, implementing Captain Vidian's recommended upgrades. The ship was barely recognizable under the scaffolding and construction equipment, its hull plates removed in sections to allow for structural reinforcement. They're essentially rebuilding her from the inside out, Anders observed, surveying the work with mixed emotions. While the improvements would undoubtedly enhance the ship's capabilities, he couldn't help feeling some attachment to the vessel that had carried him through exile. Maintaining her essential design and character, Princess Cell assured him, sensing his concern. But providing the capabilities necessary for our Covenant missions. Captain Vidian emerged from the construction area, acknowledging them both with a formal bow that nonetheless carried genuine respect. Commander, or should I say Navigator Cade, Princess Cell, the upgrades proceed on schedule. I see you've recommended substantial modifications, Anders noted, gesturing toward the extensive reconstruction. Necessary adaptations for your unique piloting approach, Vidian explained. The neural interface is being completely redesigned to reduce feedback strain while enhancing sensitivity. Hull plating will incorporate adaptive material that responds to energy fluctuations you identify through the interface. Anders raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. You've given this considerable thought, Captain. I observed your piloting techniques firsthand, Vidian replied simply. The ship should complement your abilities, not constrain them. Princess Cell smiled approvingly. Captain Vidian has always understood that tools should serve their users' strengths, rather than force adaptation to standardized designs. The captain accepted the praise with a slight inclination of his head. Would you care to review the detailed specifications? He offered Anders. For the next hour, Anders immersed himself in the technical aspects of the Nomad's transformation, offering suggestions and modifications based on his experience. Princess Cell contributed her own insights, particularly regarding exploration requirements beyond Imperial space. Captain Vidian incorporated their input with professional efficiency, clearly valuing the practical expertise both brought to the discussion. As they concluded the review, Vidian was called away to address a supply logistics issue, leaving Anders and Princess Cell alone beside the partially disassembled ship. He respects you, Princess Cell observed once the captain was out of earshot. More than protocol requires. The feeling is mutual, Anders admitted. He strikes me as someone who values competence over rank. A rare quality in Imperial service, she agreed, though perhaps becoming less rare as new perspectives enter the command structure. Her gaze met his meaningfully. Anders understood the implication. His unconventional integration into the Imperial hierarchy represented an evolution, not revolution as she had specified earlier, in how the Empire identified and utilized talent regardless of traditional pathways. Change often arrives unexpectedly. He echoed Princess Alixa's earlier observation. Though I suspect this particular change was more carefully orchestrated than it appeared. Princess Cell's expression revealed nothing, but her eyes held a hint of amusement. The universe unfolds in mysterious ways, Navigator Cade. Indeed it does, Your Highness, he replied, matching her formal tone, but allowing a smile to touch his lips. Indeed it does. In the days that followed, Anders settled into his new reality with cautious optimism. The formal covenant documents were finalized, establishing clear parameters for his dual partnerships, while preserving essential autonomy. Princess Alixa's scientific collaboration focused primarily on Nebula research, utilizing his neural sensitivity to energy patterns that conventional sensors couldn't detect. Princess Cell's exploration compact outlined a series of frontier expeditions, beginning with the nebula's outer boundaries, but extending to regions long considered too hazardous for standard navigation. High Counselor Thalon maintained diplomatic oversight of both arrangements, though with surprising restraint. The political value of Anders's unique abilities seemed to outweigh traditional protocol concerns, at least for the moment. The Nomad's reconstruction continued, apace, transforming the exile's refuge into a vessel worthy of its new designation as a royal exploration ship. Advanced sensor arrays, enhanced neural interface systems, and reinforced structural elements would enable ventures into territories previously considered inaccessible. Captain Vidian oversaw the work, personally ensuring that Anders's specific requirements were prioritized alongside Imperial standards. As the launch date for their first official expedition approached, Anders found himself in the observation lounge of the Imperial flagship, gazing out at the distant swirl of the Vortex Nebula. The chaotic energy patterns that had once nearly claimed his life now represented the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with purpose and possibility after years of bitter exile. Contemplating our first destination, Princess Sel's voice came from behind him. Anders turned to find her dressed not in royal regalia, but in practical expedition attire, the uniform of a frontier explorer rather than an imperial princess. The sight reinforced the reality of their upcoming venture. "Remembering our first," he corrected, "the rescue that started all this." She moved to stand beside him, studying the nebula's distant form. "A fortunate crisis in retrospect." "For some of us," Anders acknowledged, "though I doubt Lion would agree from his imperial detention cell. His interrogation has yielded valuable intelligence about Corvallian technology," Princess Sel noted, "including improvements to our own shielding systems." Anders nodded, unsurprised that the Empire would extract every possible advantage from the situation. "And the official diplomatic position. Officially, the Athetheran Empire regrets the unfortunate misunderstanding involving unauthorized Corvallian operatives," she replied with perfect diplomatic intonation before allowing a more natural expression. "Unofficially, both sides understand the new balance of power. Our nebula research continues with enhanced security, while the Corvallians receive limited access to non-critical findings. Politics as usual," Anders observed without rancor. The pragmatic resolution suited the complex realities of interstellar relations. "With unusual elements," Princess Sel corrected, gesturing toward him. "A former exile now bound to royal twins through an unprecedented dual covenant. A neural interface pilot authorized to explore beyond imperial boundaries. A ship designed specifically for impossible journeys." Anders smiled slightly. "When you phrase it that way, it sounds almost destined," she suggested. "I was going to say improbable," he replied. "But perhaps there's a fine line between the two." Princess Sel considered this philosophical point. The unlikeliest paths often lead to the most significant destinations. The nebula itself demonstrates that principal chaotic patterns, concealing navigable currents that reveal themselves only to those willing to trust what they feel, rather than what conventional wisdom dictates. Anders studied her with newfound appreciation. Beneath the royal exterior and diplomatic training lay a mind that understood the fundamental nature of exploration, the balance between calculated risk and intuitive navigation that had defined his own approach to piloting. "The Nomad will be ready for launch tomorrow," he informed her, returning to more practical matters. "Captain Vidian has completed the final system checks personally." "Excellent," she replied with genuine enthusiasm. "The expedition team is prepared as well, a small but capable group focused on preliminary boundary mapping. And your sister's research objectives? Primary focus on energy pattern documentation and analysis," Princess Sel explained. Though she understands this first mission prioritizes establishing safe navigation protocols for future expeditions. Anders nodded approvingly. The balanced approach respected both Covenant partnerships while setting realistic goals for their initial venture. "And High Counselor Thalon's position? Official endorsement with minimal interference," she reported with satisfaction, though he insists on regular status reports and emergency protocols. Reasonable precautions. Anders acknowledged having expected far more restrictive oversight, given Thalon's traditional inclinations. The High Counselor is more adaptable than his formal demeanor suggests, Princess Cell observed. He recognizes value in unconventional approaches provided they serve imperial interests. Their conversation paused as they both contemplated the nebula, the swirling chaos that had brought them together, and now promised to reveal its secrets to their combined expertise. The silence between them held none of the awkwardness of their early encounters, having evolved into the comfortable understanding of partners with shared purpose. "I never expected this outcome when I accepted Thalon's rescue mission," Anders admitted finally. "Restoration, perhaps. Redemption, possibly. But not this." "Genuine partnership," Princess Cell suggested. "Purpose," Anders clarified. "After years of exile of existing rather than living, I find myself looking forward rather than back." Princess Cell's expression softened. "The best explorations are always forward-facing, Navigator Cade. The past informs our journey, but doesn't determine our destination." Anders found himself smiling at the philosophical observation so characteristic of her thoughtful nature beneath the royal exterior. "Well said, Your Highness." "Cell," she corrected gently. "When protocol doesn't demand otherwise, remember?" "Cell," he acknowledged the informal address, still feeling slightly presumptuous, despite their covenant partnership. "Tomorrow we navigate the impossible together." "We already have," she reminded him, her gaze holding his with quiet confidence. "Everything that follows is simply continuing the journey." As they stood together before the viewport, the distant nebula seemed to pulse with invitation, its chaotic energies promising discovery, challenge, and possibility to those brave enough to venture beyond conventional boundaries. For Anders Cade, former exile and newly appointed royal navigator, the swirling patterns represented not just scientific mystery, but personal truth. Sometimes the most impossible paths led to the most unexpected destinations. Tomorrow would bring the formal beginning of their covenant expedition, the first of many ventures into uncharted territories. But in this moment of quiet anticipation, Anders recognized that the true journey had already begun, not with naval charts and sensor readings, but with the unexpected connection between a disgraced pilot and a royal explorer, both seeking purpose beyond the constraints of their respective pasts. The nebula awaited its secrets, ready to be revealed through the unique partnership they had forged. And beyond it stretched the vast unknown of the Cerulean expanse, the Magellan Drift, and countless other frontiers that conventional navigation couldn't penetrate. With the enhanced Nomad as their vessel, and their complementary skills as guidance, the impossible had become not merely achievable, but inevitable. As the first light of the system's star touched the edge of the nebula, illuminating its swirling patterns with golden radiance, Anders felt a sense of certainty that had eluded him since the Proxima incident. Whatever challenges awaited in the depths of unexplored space, he would face them not as an exile seeking redemption, but as a navigator charting new paths, both for the empire that had reclaimed him and for the princess who had seen value where others saw only disgrace. The impossible nebula had changed everything, and tomorrow they would return to its mysteries together, bound not by ancient covenant alone, but by shared purpose and mutual respect, the strongest alliance of all.